Hey everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the CMA podcast here in Europe, EMEA times. With me, my good friend and CMA cohort colleague, Miguel.
Yeah,
Welcome in.
hello. Nice to see you, Christian.
And nice to see you too.
You suddenly go on mute. Still not able to hear you, my friends.
How about now?
Now I can hear you.
All right, yeah. For some reason, my microphone would just switch off randomly on the USB port. So sorry about that. A little bit of technical issues that can happen. Maybe we should ask someone who knows technology about this for future events. So thank you everyone for joining in. Today we are going to cover one of the big mysteriums of ServiceNow, and that is discovery. What we will not be discussing, and I want to mention that beforehand, we will not be getting into the full ITOM with all the event management stuff and so on. That's probably due for another day. We are limited on time, only have an hour for this. If you have any questions in regards to approaching discovery projects, maybe some weird technology stuff, you can drop it in the chat. We are live today on LinkedIn and on YouTube in parallel, where you can also rewatch this video later. So without further ado, you already know me. I'm Christian. I'm hosting the podcast itself, and with me is Michael. You want to introduce yourself? What you're doing? Who you are?
Yeah, sure. So, as Christian mentioned, my name is Michał Lamdy, but everyone calls me Mike for the obvious reason because of my name. So basically, as Christian mentioned, we were on the same cohort and we passed the CMA on the same cohort about 2.5 years ago. Me personally, I'm working with ServiceNow more than 11 years right now. And my main area of expertise is ITOM integrations and, of course, ITSM, as we all have. And lately, CMDB plus CSDM, and believe it or not, CSM as well.
Oh, CSM. That's also a very interesting topic. And we will be talking about this not today, but in a different podcast. Now, as you mentioned, you're an integration specialist for ITOM, and I will ask you a couple of things down the line.
Sure.
For starters, we should probably, for those who don't know yet, kind of make clear what are the two different base approaches to discovery. People ask me, should I do service mapping? Should I just do discovery? Would you go into the detail as to what the different approaches are and why we should use them?
Yeah, so basically, from my perspective, everything depends on the maturity of the company and how you set the scene with the customer, because that tends to be the biggest problems always if you want to go with the discovery of or straight to the jump to the service mapping. And from my experience, there is no simple answer, yes or no. Both, if you should go right or left way. Usually, I always tend to start with the conversation. How mature is your company? Do you have a healthy CMDB? And what is the most important thing? Do you have correct defined services with service owners and defined entry points? Of course, we can identify this during the workshops with the client, but this always gives me at least a brief overview which approach we can take. Another thing with that is that the real question here is, are you fresh with the service now? For example, if this is a greenfield implementation, or we are talking about a mature company. That also depends from my end. Because if you are a fresh implementation company, I always like to start with a conversation. If you have defined your services, would you like to go a service per service approach, which might be easier to adopt? Or you first of all want to lay down your CMDB and basically see how well and how healthy your data are, because the data is another hot topic, no matter if it's going to be discovery or service mapping.
Yeah, you're touching a lot of points that we
Yes.
will be getting into, and one of the main points you brought up right in the beginning, and I would like to just quickly share one of my favorite slides whenever I talk about ServiceNow discovery or any sort of ITOM implementation project. I tend to use this one, and I have been using this slide for, I don't know, 10 years plus. My first implementation for discovery was 12, 13 years ago ish. And one of the things, and it comes down to the maturity level that you said, that usually goes wrong is the CMDB is really terrible and in a terrible shape. Do you have some sort of example what it is that you usually do to getting the barn fixed, as I mentioned that in this one here?
Usually my first question is, can you please introduce me to your CMDB and data owners? And it's like a dropping on a bomb on a city. Yeah? It's always set on fire, the scene. And that's always the hot topic, because not only there is a problem with identifying the owners, and if you are not able to identify owners, usually there is 99% guarantee that there is no governance around data. That's what causes mayhem.
Yeah.
But also what it brings into the mind of stakeholders is, wait, who is handling our data? And that's a really good, funny and good conversation that you can have.
Yeah, then they start to scramble,
So
right?
the first point that I'm always doing is try to identify those personas, and then we are taking it from there. If there are governance, if there is governance, and if there are data owners, then we can at least start already immediately validating the data quality. That's the second topic. Yeah.
I find it funny that a lot of projects, and it's not only limited to discovery, and I will be talking about governance, and especially I will be talking about OCM with a specialist from Germany in a couple of weeks on this podcast. A lot of companies don't seem to understand that when they are trying to generate value, they need to not only focus on technology, but also need to make the necessary organizational investments, like you said, discovery. The data owner for your CMDB, and it's not only that. I mean, there's a bunch of important stakeholders when you do a discovery project.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. It's not only the data; it's also this the security personas. It's also the people that are responsible for the network, and we can go that all day long. Who is important for that? But usually, and sometimes I'm even terrified to how many projects this actually happen, because in my last project for really big company from the telecommunication environments. Not only this one, all the telecommunication companies that I work with, the simple question about data owners was, that might be a problem, and it was terrifying sometimes. Yeah.
Would you agree with the statement that a lot of these kind of issues stem from a more or less non-strategic approach to a project like this?
I completely agree. And from my perspective, there are always a couple of things behind it. First of all, there is really hard to find, and I can understand the companies, because there is really fine to identify volunteer who will take the responsibility. And I think the responsibility is a key word here, because if you are responsible for something, then the things can go really wrong, not only for you, but for the company, and they will blame you. And sometimes it is really hard to identify that person if you are not strictly, for example, hiring person for that reason, especially in really old, well-established companies. Yeah.
Yes, it is something that I have observed over the years that in search of a data owner, or call him CMDB owner, call him like key stakeholder or them key stakeholder, whatever, we often default back to, oh, this person has been here for a very, very long time. He or she knows all the infrastructure and knows how we are built, how our infrastructure works and set up. And then it defaults back to this person, whether this person has time or not. And this is kind of, again, coming back to the governance issue. It is not only about the capability and the understanding of their own competencies in this kind of new setup, but
and I think it's also about lacking a little bit of forward thinking, because a lot of people think that it's just the data within the database, and then when they go live, they're identifying, okay, we have a change on this part of the network, and they are going, okay, but there is no change group assigned to that service offering and to those CIs. Okay, why it's not there? And we are missing the, I don't know, IP address for that and this, and why it's not there. We cannot proceed with the change, and it's like a snowball effect.
I think from what I have experienced, and I've done this, I think 3 or 4 times now with the ITOM discovery projects, is that even the key stakeholders don't have enough resources from a time perspective. This is a full-time thing, at least for the starter. Whether or not you do a full approach, or you just go, and we will talk about the value-based approach in just a couple of minutes here. But you should be putting aside some reasonable time to make sure that everything that you do can even be achieved and is not something that people need to do as a side business.
Yeah, that's for sure something that requires a lot of effort, especially in the beginning, as you mentioned. And people, that's why OCM is also important for that part. People need to know, need to understand.
Yeah. And this in particular, and again, we'll come back to the key stakeholders in a bit. This goes especially for security, because most of the time, oh wait, this is a CMDB project. Why would we need to involve IT security? Yeah, you need to, but it is also our duty as the architects, and often also in the engagement management and strategy advisement that we as CMAs do, to let the respective program managers and CIOs know that these are important, very important components of their project, and not just the data is important.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is one of our biggest roles, to set up scene at the beginning, what they should expect, not only from the tool itself, but also from their own people as well. So that's like a step number 1, make them aware. Your mic's dropped again, Christian.
So how about now?
Yeah, it's cool.
Have you ever done this successfully in a project like this?
That's a tricky question. It's depend on the magnitude of a project. If we are talking, for example, of a POC or a small chunk to prove that it's going to be working for a company, then I can safely say yes. If we are talking about full-blown, let's not touch service mapping yet, but discovery, it only happens once in my life, and it was not such a big company, if I'm honest.
Right.
But it was only one example of it, but maybe it was not even 100%, it was like 80% good. Because there were still some technical bits and pieces that went wrong. And this is really in core, it's a really technical stuff when we go past through the business, and there is a lot of network stuff that can go wrong.
Obviously. And I mean, since discovery is such a technical project, at the end of the
Mhm.
day, I will show why. Also, I have a slide for that.
And I believe that also heavily depends on when you start workshops and when you're defining what are your success criteria. If you have well-defined success criteria, then you can succeed. If you just have an approach, make a discovery for us, what you want to achieve, what value you want to bring out of the platform, discover everything, then you are guaranteed to fail.
Yes. I think, though, the main factor that I've seen in the past for discovery projects to fail was essentially that people are under the wrong impression how a project like this works. And, it is just a technology project. And that's why we are basically, we just need to do this. We just need to essentially switch it on, and then we get all the data, right? And I'm memeing here a little bit, but I think it's covering this quite well. Just switch it on, and you get the CMDB filled, and that's just wrong.
Oh, that can go really, really bad.
I've
Again, I think that's again a really good example of setting the scene at the beginning. So what we want to achieve and how we want to achieve it, because I was part of the project when the client was asking, can you do the discovery of our routers and switches? Of course we can, that's not a problem. SNMP will do that for you. Then when we actually approach the enterprise architect, they say, no, we will never ever in this life allow you to do an SMP discovery, because we have 3 million devices, and on each device we have full 3 million table worth of routing table records. If you switch SNMP, you will kill our network.
I mean, this is just the technology thing that can go wrong, right?
Yeah, but
One thing that I would like to get to, and
Mhm.
this is something that we've talked about before, is in order to be really successful with a discovery implementation, you need to, from my perspective, make sure that the customer understands, or the team understands, that it is better to go slow and not do everything at once, because you will fail. This is so complex, such a complex topic with so many different technology layers that you would need to coordinate. And you should rather go piece by piece. And I like to call this value driven iterations, in which you set yourself, like in an agile process, smaller goals, and you iterate forward on them.
Yeah.
So what I usually see in a phased approach like this is you start with a planning, and the planning can involve, aside from the technical stuff that we see here in the slides, the planning should involve the key stakeholders. It should involve the security clearances and bringing everyone to one table, and also make sure that everyone understands what is the actual goal that we're trying to achieve per iteration, not in total. I mean, everyone kind of should be aligned with what we want to achieve in total,
Yeah, that's completely true.
right? We have Jacek in the chat, who iterated on
Yeah, you can
the.
pull all the data that you want. That's true, and I agree with that, Jacek. The only thing that I would add, it's not only the source and quality that is important and the owner, but also what purpose this data serves. Because if there is no purpose for the data, it should not be in the CMDB in the first place.
Correct. And this is the value driven approach, right?
Yeah,
You need to understand in your planning phase what it is that you want to achieve with the data. I have one slide in my deck. I maybe pull it out later. It's the big question: what is a data lake for? It's to drown in data, basically. That's what it's
that's true.
for, right? And my first discovery project that I ever did, I made the mistake that the guy in the meme said. I don't always, but I want it all. Um, and the problem with that was I had so many issues that I basically drowned in error messages. I drowned in incompatibilities, in patterns not being executed correctly, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And the main reason for that was we just tried to do everything at once.
Yeah. So the value should be the king as usually. So the rest should be just something that supports it, and the data is again only small cog in the big machine that allows you to run it. But if there is no purpose for that machine, there is no reason to pour the data into it.
Correct. So during the planning phase, you evaluate, is the data, does it provide the value to your implementation, to your CMDB that you want as well? And if it doesn't, you might as well, skip to the next one. But you should be then go ahead and do a step-by-step approach when you start developing your solution. Go ahead, select a certain amount of a representative amount of infrastructure that you want to discover and bring it in. Check on your data, review.
Yeah, and I see a comment from Frank that CMDB is not a project, it's a lifelong task, and discovery is a small piece of the game.
Oh yeah, that's
Again,
absolutely correct.
That's true. That's why we said if you have an owner, it's a full-blown day-to-day job for those kind of people to actually make sure that the data is there, that it's healthy, that the source are introduced correctly, and so on and so forth. So that's a spot-on comment.
No, absolutely. And I think we didn't mention that it's not a CMDB project we're talking about, but it's not a CMDB project that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, that's a small part of it.
It's just a small part of it. Is how to fill the CMDB, and discovery is one of the most powerful tools to do so. But obviously, you have different things, and when you do CMDB, there's not only the technical side of things that you want to cover. And we will be talking about CSDM in a future podcast. I'm currently waiting to get my hands on the CSDM5 white paper, and then we'll talk about that in a future episode. But yeah, Frank, you're absolutely correct. It's just a small piece of the game. What I was getting at in this kind of overview was really that even if you just pick a small piece, like say one CI class from one or two locations that are representative for your infrastructure, you review the data. And that's when you run into the issues.
Yeah, but at least there is something that you can actually work with. And as you mentioned, you will not be drowned with the errors and so on and so forth. That's why we tend to always convince client to do a POC for discovery. And for example, not sometimes if the client is really big, not even go with one class, but maybe with a small IP range to see how the discovery will behave in their environment at the beginning.
What's your most common issue that you run into when you do discovery projects?
Misunderstanding, if I'm honest.
Really?
Because if you not set the scene correctly, or maybe there are sometimes stakeholders that are missing, they think that CMDB will do 95% of a job for them. Discovery will do 95% job for them, and then when it comes to the project, then it's okay, that's not how it works. And the second big issue is always security teams.
Yes. Well, to be honest, my experience says it's mostly security. So
a simple example that we have like a month ago is that we want to do discovery for one client, and the security team say, no, we will not give you our credentials. But guys, you have CyberArk in use. Let's use the key vault. No, we don't want to store all our key in our one key vault. Not gonna happen.
What do you have it for?
That a good question. And they said that they are not trusting key vaults. So I don't know why they have it in the first place. But then it took a lot of time and management involving to convince them to give us the key vault access.
Would you agree that a lot of these, like I said, for me, most of the issues that I've faced in the past are security related, right? It's firewall rules, it's closed ports, credentials, all these kind of fun topics that you can spend so many hours on to just finding them, because sometimes the ServiceNow patterns tend to be not too verbose, and then you're running behind some issues that turns out, oh wait, we didn't have access to that system. Well,
Yeah, exactly. So I would say it's mostly security, but it's a combination about security and network teams because they usually work in conjunction, especially if we are talking about firewalls and opening ports, etc.
which is a security topic from my perspective.
Depends on company setup, but but yeah, usually it's security.
Right. Would you get behind my statement that I'm going to make here, that the lack of commitment, no, that the security issues basically, and in most cases, stem from a lack of commitment with the security teams because they are not properly involved in the projects?
I stand behind it, but I would like add one thing to it is that you will touch it later in your other podcasts. I believe it's a lack of communication. And again, OCM, if they are not well informed, they will be basically no. Because this is what they are paid for, to say no, to secure the something. And I believe that that's the problem. The lack of commitment might be, the reason of because of the lack of communication, or sometimes they just don't want to do it to cause troubles to themselves.
Yeah, no, I understand, and I agree with you. It's OCM is a discipline that unfortunately is kind of missed out on by most companies. I mean, obviously it costs extra, but it is also perceived as something that slows a project kind of down, because professional OCM people or resources that are involved are not necessarily most technic driven, and so
there is a question from Frank as well.
Yeah, I would like to, Frank. I saw your question. Is it okay if we cover this a little later? I want to go through the organizational topics, and we will come back to more technical questions in just a bit. We still have plenty of time.
And OCM resources also tends to be really expensive, if I'm honest.
Yeah, that's true, because they need to be professional communicators, and I think there's also very often they are not being taken seriously by technicians. That's something that I have experienced in the past. They come in, you bring in an OCM resource, and the technical project leader is basically disregarding them because they are so focused on the actual solution rather than the people who work with that solution, which is honestly kind of sad.
True.
Kind of reminds me of a statement that one of my first IT managers did. IT would be great if we just didn't have users.
That's true.
That's where it comes down to. All right. So let's get back to the value-driven approach of reviewing the data when you run into into all the issues, and then from my perspective, do like iterative soft rollouts. Bring in additional IP ranges. Bring in another CI class or another location. Check the results. See that you can drive down the number of errors and issues that you have, and then keep going. Basically, iterate and iterate. So what that means is you will not finish with just rolling out one class. You will just have some sort of an additional iteration or an initial iteration, and then build upon it.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely a repetitive process to polish it.
No. All right. Well, and then obviously we have after the soft rollout, we have the workshops and trainings, which comes down mainly to the CMDB part. I think this is one of the issues that we already mentioned, that CMDB is seen often as a project and not as a full-blown solution in itself that delivers to other solutions.
Yeah, that's a big problem, especially if you are talking about workshops and trainings, because again, people tends to think that this once you run discovery once, it's gonna be lasting forever.
Right. Frank has a remark to the security about IT and OT devices and OT discovery. That is, I mean, it comes down to what you produce your money with, right? OT companies are more reluctant. I can't talk to that. I have never done an OT discovery so far.
Me neither, unfortunately.
So I've not run into
maybe
this.
if you are, okay, maybe if you are talking about telecommunication companies, because if you say that they in the end using IT equipment, they will kill you, because for them they are a telecommunication company, so it's a telco gear. So that might be in some cases treated as an operational technology as well. So I can say I do it, and the opposition from the security team was equally hard as in the IT project as well. So maybe I step on a wrong project in that case.
And maybe we can come back to Frank's question from earlier about the device type that you wouldn't cover. I mean, we are all ServiceNow kind of evangelists and want to make as much things happen with the platform and so on. But I also mentioned earlier that there are multiple ways of filling your CMDB, and discovery is a great way. What patterns can do is amazing. Question is, sometimes do you need that, or is there a different way to doing that? And OT is, I think, one of the topics where this could apply, right?
Yeah, and I can add to that because I don't think that there is a device that I would not recommend to discover. For me, the recommendation, the recommendation would be, is it worth to discover, worth the effort? Because, for example, we had a problem during the pandemic area that a lot of people goes for the home offices and they takes the laptops and so on and so forth. And that was a problem because usually they were working in the offices, the machines were discovered automatically because they were plugged into the company network. But when they were using the VPNs, that was a problem. And then the question was it worth, for example, use ACC to discover their laptops, or is it not worth it? For some company it is worth, for another it is not. So again, I would not recommend any device that is not worth to discover. I would then suggest to actually, if it's bring value to the company, to actually do it.
I just had a customer a couple of weeks ago where we were talking about bringing Kubernetes information into the CMDB. And aside from the general, how can I say that nicely, chaos that is the plugin structure around Kubernetes infrastructure. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, Michael.
Yeah.
I can go in detail otherwise. And the licensing that comes with these kind of license applications that comes with these kind of plugins. We had an interesting discussion about, does it make sense to bring these things in? ServiceNow offers, for example, for GCP, the Microsoft Graph Connector to bring in your Kubernetes infrastructure and fill the appropriate tables. But that's quite a bit of license cost that comes along with that. And that's where you need to make your value determination. Do you need all the data with all its connections? And does that provide value for you and your services inside the CMDB? And if it does, it is absolutely worth doing this automated, because otherwise you're going crazy. However, if you just need some base information about applications that are somewhere on a Kubernetes, you might not need to go that deeply. And that's where you need to do your evaluation.
Yeah,
I think
I agree.
that is kind of what you iterated at, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is also when we talk about the value itself. It comes down, from my perspective, to the question: what do we do with the CI information? In my first discovery project, I faced a lot of opposition when we discovered the Windows infrastructure. There was some people who were like, yeah, but if I cannot see which process is running in real time on a device, then the CMDB information is of no value to me. What would you tell a person like that?
That's a really strange thing, because that's a monitoring process, not a discovery process, because people tend to forget that discovery is feeding CMDB, and CMDB is all about CIs and assets that can change over time, not in real time.
Exactly.
Because if you are talking real time, that you are stepping up into the monitoring, I don't want to say event management, because again, it depends on the use case. But there are completely different, applications to do the real-time monitoring, and they are built for it. ServiceNow is not built for real-life monitoring.
Exactly. And this is what it comes down to, right? Why do we want to fill the CMDB? We don't want to fill the CMDB for
Looking at the data.
Well, yeah, not on, but like you said, not for monitoring. You integrate with a
Exactly.
monitoring solution, and you use the CI metadata essentially, which I will come to that, is a topic for its own. But you use the CMDB data to make sure that you can follow your IT processes, your ITIL processes, and make sure that you get your incidents assigned correctly, that the right people are taking care of this, that you align with change management and so on.
True.
There is data, and here I'm curious how you solve that usually. We haven't talked about this before. There is data that you can never discover. And
I had already mentioned something similar. The company that have 3 million routers that we are not able to discover because of we will kill the network if we will do SNMP against router that has 3 million routing table entries.
Right, but I wasn't referring to technology.
Okay.
The CMDB connects the technology side with the organizational side. That's what CSDM does at the end of the day,
true.
right? And certain information you cannot discover, like organizational metadata. You need to find some logic to bring that in. Locations is kind of solved in discovery. You can set up your schedule based on locations.
True.
And I think there is a logic inside that then replicates the location into the respective column. But everything else, ownership information, support information, this is all stuff that you cannot discover. How do you normally approach this?
First of all, I normally try to understand what is the whole process around it within that company that already exists. Because if they are asking those questions, then the process must exist to follow this in the current environment and current situation. And then I've tried to just co-op the process with the existing solution. There are ways to populate stuff outside of discovery. We all know that. The discovery should do the stuff, but it's not the only one. We have Active Directories, we have the SCCM connections, we have Intune, as Frank mentioned in the chat. So first of all, let's establish where those data information lies and if they are really needed inside CMDB. Because if you are talking about, delicate information, maybe there is no reason for that data to even exist in ServiceNow in the first place.
Right. And that comes also again down to the value
Exactly.
discussion.
Everything
that we
goes
before,
to the value. If you need that data on the CMDB, then I would start questioning why do you need them? What is the value that data brings to your company? What is the process that actually use them?
Right.
And usually they cannot understand. They cannot answer that question really easily. And that's pretty much understandable because it's a really delicate and complex process, but we need to establish that.
That reminds me of my first CMDB exercise that I did. I think it was on a Knowledge 2015, something around. It must have been 13 or 15. I don't remember. We were at the conference, and ServiceNow did a lab session, and it was an entire morning. So it was 4 hours, a really long lab, in which we were supposed to build a CMDB by groups. And that was for me, I was still in the skill shift towards ServiceNow. It was a very interesting exercise because we were limited in what we were supposed to write into the CMDB. And already back then, we talked about what's the value of the data that we are bringing into the CMDB. It was not necessarily a discovery topic, but a CMDB topic itself. And we were only allowed to bring, each group was only allowed to bring in, I think, 5 attributes in total. And obviously there was then overlap. And from the value, and from what I remember, most companies didn't focus on technical data to be brought in, which, it's easy once you have a connection to pull all sorts of technical information out.
Yeah.
But the most valuable information for everyone involved was the organizational information. Whom that item belongs to, who's responsible for it.
Yeah, and that's another, like, I would say it's just a tip of an iceberg in that situation, because data is a technical bits and pieces, and owning that stuff and know who does what from the process perspective, it's another beast by itself that should be tackled, of course, throughout the discovery process, but also beyond that, because from my experience, also my clients sometimes forget that if you want to drive discovery, there should be pretty much always in some form or shape and parallel process around CMDB itself, how to handle that, and how the operational data will fit within your organization as well, and the CMDB. That's really, really, really important topic.
Yeah. And that's why I'm bringing this back. This goes to the barn, right? If you remember back to the picture, it very much comes down to, and this is also why I'm so particular about bringing this up, because discovery, and we're talking about the secrets to discovery. The secret to discovery, from my perspective, is not necessarily the technology. Sure, the security technology around it is an absolute secret of actually getting data into the CMDB and getting the data out of your infrastructure. But the secret to discovery is bringing in the right data and know what the hell you're going to do with it.
Yes. Right data, right place, right time, and what value they support. That's pretty much everything that we need. What purpose they serve, pretty much. Yeah?
How many of your customers do that correctly?
Now or at the beginning?
Both.
So I cannot recall any customer that do that right from the beginning. And I believe that's a little bit of like a painful beauty of it, because that also depends on what you identify by right and wrong. All of them have some kind of process and structure behind it, behind the data, behind the owners, whether they exist or not, and so on and so forth. And this which is come down to the, again, value-driven approach and the ServiceNow best practice way of doing that. So if we are talking about that, none of them pretty much do that good from the beginning. There were some that were really close, but there were some crucial parts that were missing. Some of them has really good structure and quality of the data already, but there was really blurry ownership side, and the operational side of the data. Some of them has really good structure. They know pretty much everything, but then it turns out that the mandatory data that they were looking to be in the CMDB were never populated because no one cared about it. Yeah.
Right. Who do you think is the most important person to bring up the necessity of this organizational work around the discovery project?
Again, I don't know if there is one good answer to that question, because usually the person who should drive that, and again, the question is if we are talking of the companies that already have ServiceNow and they want to take to
Yes.
another level, or if we are talking about fresh initiatives. If we are talking about fresh initiatives, usually the attitude should come from the senior stakeholders, because they should loudly explain to their colleagues from the top to the bottom why this is important for us and why this is important for you and how it can make your life easier in the future. That's of course that's my subjective opinion. If we are talking about existing ServiceNow environments, in my opinion, usually this should come if the CMDB owner exists, then it should come from him, of course. But if it does not exist, then it should at least come from the ServiceNow owner, because there should be a defined someone who owning the solution, and he should spot, maybe not even personally, but sometimes he should even get, he should listening to the people who working with the tool, and then it should came from him. That's my opinion. What is your take on that?
Yes, I think the platform owner has a certain responsibility to make sure that the entire implementation kind of works together, and also that a certain strategy alignment is being done. I think the people who guide them, us, you, me,
Also a good idea.
we should, and we are not making often. We haven't done that in the past, I would say, properly. I mean, making sure that the necessary stakeholders are involved. We will not always be successful, and I've seen that in the past. Also, if you are very adamant on bringing up whom you want to have involved in a project, that doesn't mean that you get this information. All right, but then that's where you need to work together, and where you go to the actual advisory role, and bring in the outside advice and say, hey, take the explanation about the value-driven approach. Because at the end of the day, from my perspective, if you are a total technocrat, you love discovery because it's awesome. It does a lot of cool stuff. We're doing things with it that would normally take a person days, weeks, or months to bring into the CMDB in different ways. Especially when we are not only talking about the discovery itself, but the service mapping. That's I'm exaggerating, obviously, but that's pure magic, right? But to make sure that at the end of the day, it is a successful implementation. From my perspective, it is also our responsibility to hit the brakes and
yes.
say, this is not it. There is no value in doing that, and that is often hard to do.
Yeah, it is, especially if people again thinks that, as you mentioned, that discovery is a magical tool and service mapping is a magical tool, that a flick on a switch, it will do everything perfectly for you.
It is magic still, but no, it's not magic. But obviously, for a non-technician, it can seem this way, and the technician will either be like, sure, cool, and we got the information that we want, or he will be, and or she, and I have seen that also in some projects. They will be disappointed because you cannot discover everything. And here is another, let me say, stick on the road for discovery. Do not get driven by pure technical details. I have seen discovery projects not running through the Q&A phase, UAT phase. Why? Because certain things in discovery out of the box work in a certain way. They are optimized to work with a CMDB data structure. You could go ahead and, based on the input of certain technicians, remodel things. Oracle is a good example, right? The Oracle structure, if you discover that, is kind of meh. But it does work, and it
Yes,
brings in your
exactly.
information. And the question that you should ask yourself, and it's in particular then in coordination with the Oracle technician and a program manager or a project manager, in this case, technical one, does this provide already the value? Do I really, really need to get all the listener information and the Oracle service IPs and ports in? Is that necessary? Does that provide additional value? And the answer is mostly no, it does not. And you need to kind of find a compromise to still get the implementation accepted.
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, so make a good, good workshops around that. It's really key.
Yeah.
So you can understand how deep you can go and how, first of all, how deep you should go to the infrastructure.
Right. And it's the infrastructure itself that you want to discover, and also the setup of the structure. Do you
Yeah.
need everything at once? You can put easily enough time into thinking about, should I discover my DMZ?
Yeah.
Or you can be like, should I do it? Should I really discover my DMZ and harden a mid server or use some sort of a credential-less discovery here?
I had some similar discussion about the DMZ, and it was really, really funny.
Can you go into detail? I'm curious.
So one of our customers really wants to discover the DMZs because they have a lot of them because of their current setup.
All right.
And basically, again, the problem with that was how to even, how to even, how to say that, how to even approach that, because it's by design, in quotes, demilitared zone. Yeah. So it should be a really limited entry to that zone. And then we said, okay, let's see what we can do for you. And then we approached the security team and they say, hell no. But at least what we agreed with them, okay, are you able to get a small portion of your DMZ replicated in a test lab environment? So the security team will be happy. Let's make a quick small POC to see what we are able to bring back, and if you will be happy with the outcome. And it turns out that outcome was okay-ish, but actually it was not bringing more data that they already stored in the third-party database system, because they already have third-party database system to store those information. And I said to them, okay, why in the first place you don't even give us information that you already stored this data somewhere else? Yeah.
How does it get there though? And we're in the third party database system.
So because they still need to have those information for reporting purposes, because they were like MSP and they were reporting about stuff that happening in the DMZ to the stakeholders from the third parties. And they need to store this data somewhere, at least for the reporting purposes. And they decided to do, I believe those are weekly schedule exports data to the security landing zone when they were reviewed and then put into the third-party database.
why wouldn't they, or would they at the end just import the information from the third-party database?
Yes, we agreed that we
Of
built for
course.
them an integration to the third party that built data and the relationships between the data.
Yeah, that does make sense, and a lot of sense. All right, we are nearing the end of the session a little bit here. If there are more questions, just bring them in. That's what we're here for. Obviously, we are entertaining you with our anecdotes and our experience about past discovery projects, past discovery failures. But at the end of the day, we are here to be asked by you guys on what you can do. Maybe give a little advice. That's why I'm doing this. If you had a chance to just give one fresh, oh, there you go. There's one question. What third-party tools or systems are integrated with ServiceNow? From Luke. Well, do you want to take this one?
What third-party tools or system are integrated with ServiceNow? But you can integrate whatever you want.
Exactly. The answer is yes.
Exactly. So look, there is no things like what is integrated with ServiceNow. It's the question what you want to integrate with it.
Yeah. ServiceNow is, from what I've seen in the past over 20 years that I've been doing this, one of the most interface happy systems that are out there. And whether you want to get information out of an Oracle database or MySQL, or some weird SOAP web service that is out there with interesting envelope structures, you can do it. You might need to script a little, but you can.
Yeah, I even back in the days, I even integrated flat file integration from SAP to ServiceNow for some data, so you can even flat file that stuff.
Yes, I've been asked by one of my former clients to integrate information that was in a CSV on an FTP server, and I said we're not going to do that. That was a technology they had running in their current system that was supposed to be replaced with ServiceNow, and I said we're not going to do that. This is not the 90s anymore.
Exactly.
So does that answer your question, Luke? I hope it does, because or was it more specific to which third-party database he integrated in this particular project?
So maybe before we finish, if there is no more question, I have one question to you, which is really bothering me for a long time. And why do you think ServiceNow stop allowing IoT discovery? Maybe not stop allowing, but it's no longer supported per se.
Well, I don't have an answer, obviously, right?
I'm just interested on your point of view, because I have a lot of questions from customers. Can you lately those days, especially in the enterprise, not enterprise, the companies that they have production lines, or companies that are, for example, telco even, because they have a lot of IoTs that track what is happening on the telco towers. Can ServiceNow discover IoT? And there is no simple answer to that, because you cannot pretty much do the official way discovery. You can only looking for some kind of integration trickery.
Yeah.
But there was back on the days a IoT discovery approach that there is even some parts of it still in the documentation that is no longer supported. Yeah.
I would. In fact, I think this is what we should be doing. We should try to reach out to product management and ask them why. I could see that there's potentially the vast amount of structures that you could find, that you could discover, that you do not want to support.
Yeah.
That is kind of where I would go with this, because you would need to build something custom anyways, right? And then why would you deliver a pattern that everyone is going to complain about anyways, that it doesn't do what you ask it to do, and you need to do your own patterns? My first thought.
Okay. I would probably reach out myself to the ServiceNow to find the answer if they are planning to do something in future for that.
Right. I think there are a couple of people that we could ask that question to. I have someone in mind. So let's catch up after this and see
Okay.
where this is going. Well, it is 6 p.m. If there are no more questions, then I would say we are going to end the podcast here. Second episode. Thank you very much for attending, Mike. It was a pleasure having you here.
Thank you for invitation. It was pleasure.
For everyone else, if you have, oh, that is the wrong way around. Well, let's just remove that then. If you want to ask questions, if you want to have a particular topic covered in this podcast, which at the moment is weekly. Oh, there's a question from Tarun. One question I have: should we call discovery a module or an integration? From my perspective, it's a module. It's not an integration because it is
Exactly.
a variety of integrations, and some of these, if you look into it, what you can do with discovery, some of these are whole integrations by themselves. Take any API discovery, VMware, just the simplest example. It's a whole integration in itself. Michael, you want
Exactly.
to weigh in?
No, it's a module for sure for me, and of course that depends on the point of view, but it's not like you giving one REST and API endpoint and you are good to go. It's not like that, yeah. So that's why I would call it a module, and there is a lot of additional functionality which you can adjust and so on and so forth. So for sure module.
For sure, module or application. Maybe I would even go that far, right? But
Yeah.
it's not a single integration. I hope that answers your question, Tarun. We're going to sign out here today. Next week, I don't know which topic. That depends very much on what speaker I can get hold of. Thank you very much, Mike, for attending.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure having you. And
Yeah.
to everyone else, have a great weekend and good night.
Thank you. Bye.